Detective Riley Carter had always lived like she had nothing to lose. After years of chasing criminals, staring down the barrel of danger, and losing the people she loved, Riley had built a wall around her heart. She moved through life like a storm, fierce, untouchable, unafraid, until the night she walked into St. Mary's Hospital and met Dr. Elena Marquez. Elena was everything. Riley wasn't gentle, patient, devoted to saving lives rather than hunting down danger. She wore compassion like armor, shielding her from the pain of seeing people at their worst. But beneath her steady hands and calm voice, Elena carried her own Bertazon ailing father, the crushing responsibility of her patients, and a career that left little room for her heart. Their worlds collided in the chaos of an emergency. Riley had dragged in a wounded informant, blood soaking her shirt, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Elena met her in the trauma bay, snapping orders with calm authority, her dark eyes flashing with determination. "Step back, detective," Elena said firmly as she worked. "You've done your part. Let me do mine." Riley should have been annoyed at being pushed aside. Instead, she found herself captivated. There was fire in Elena's gaze, strength in her every movement. For the first time in years, Riley felt something stir a flicker of connection she didn't know she still had the capacity for. Over the next few weeks, their paths kept crossing. Riley would show up at the hospital with another case, another criminal casualty, and Elena would be there steady, composed, her presence grounding Riley in ways she couldn't explain. What started as sharp exchanges softened into late-night conversations over coffee in the hospital cafeteria. Riley told Elena about the dangers of her job, the nights she stared into darkness and wondered if she'd make it home. Elena shared the weight of being a doctor, the mistakes that haunted her, the fear of losing patients she fought so hard to save. Two women from opposite worlds, bound by the intensity of lives, lived on the edge. But with closeness came risk. Riley's enemies were everywhere, and Elena's reputation as a doctor meant she couldn't afford scandal. Still, neither could ignore what was building between them. One night, after a particularly brutal case, Riley showed up at the hospital bruised and exhausted. Elena found her sitting alone in the dimly lit garage, head bowed, blood on her knuckles. Without a word, Elena knelt in front of her, taking Riley's hands gently into her own. "You can't keep living like this," Elena whispered, her voice trembling with both frustration and care. Riley looked up, her walls threatening to crumble. "It's the only way I know how. I don't have anything to lose." "Yes, you do," Elena said softly, her eyes locking onto hers. "You have me." The silence that followed was charged, heavier than any gunshot Riley had ever heard. And then in that raw, unguarded moment, Riley leaned forward and kissed her. The kiss wasn't gentle, it was desperate, full of the fear and longing they had both buried. Elena's hands tightened on Riley's face, pulling her closer, answering with a passion that had been waiting to be set free. In that embrace, the world fell a wave of danger, the fear, the rules. All that remained was them. When they finally pulled apart, breathless, Elena whispered, "You scare me, Riley, because if I lose you, I lose everything." Riley swallowed hard, her heart pounding like a drum. "And if I lose you, I won't have a reason to fight anymore." From that night on, everything changed. They were no longer just a cop and a doctor. They were two souls tethered by something neither had expected, but both desperately needed love. It wasn't easy. Riley's cases grew darker, the threats closer. Elena's responsibilities pulled her in 100 directions. But through stolen moments and whispered promises, they carved out a space for each other, a sanctuary against the chaos of their worlds. 6 months later, the quiet hum of the hospital was punctuated by the insistent beep of a heart monitor. Dr. Elena Marquez sat beside the bed, her hand resting on the arm of the unconscious man before her. His chest rose and fell steadily, for now, but the fragility of his state was a constant worry at the back of her mind. 6 months ago, this man, her father, had been the picture of health, full of life and laughter. Then a sudden illness had struck, turning his usual robust energy into this haunting stillness beneath the surface. As days turned into weeks and hope began to dwindle, Elena poured all her energy into her work. The ER was her refuge, the steady rhythm of emergencies, a distraction from the ticking clock in the hospital room down the hall. One particularly chaotic night, a new face arrived in the ER, a detective with eyes as sharp and unrelenting as the city she patrolled. Riley Carter had become a fixture at St. Mary's over the past few months, not because of any particular fondness for hospitals, but because Elena was there, her love anchoring Riley in a life she never thought she could have. Detective, how many times have I told you not to come in here covered in grime? And Elena started, irritation lacing her voice as she surveyed Riley's appearance. Riley shrugged, a sheepish grin on her face. Couldn't get a shower. This informant, he was a dirty one, literally and figuratively. You know how they are. Elena sighed, her irritation melting into fond exasperation. Riley was a force of nature, unpredictable and relentless. Yet somehow, in the sterile environment of the hospital, amidst the beeping machines and the coppery tents of blood, Elena found a strange sense of calm in her storms. In the midst of treating a patient, Elena felt a familiar tug on her sleeve. Looking down, she saw Riley, her brow furrowed with concern. I need you for a minute, Riley mouthed, gesturing towards the door. Trusting Riley's instincts, Elena excused herself from the medical team, following the detective out into the hallway. What is it? Is everything okay? Elena asked, her voice hushed. Riley shook her head, her gaze fixed on the floor. There's been a hit on someone close to me. I need to go. Before Elena could respond, Riley had disappeared down the corridor, leaving Elena with a heart full of questions and unease. As Elena rushed to the scene, her thoughts raced. Who could be a threat to Riley? Her partner, perhaps, or maybe someone from one of her ongoing cases. But as she rounded the corner into Riley's apartment, what she saw stopped her in her tracks. It was Riley, kneeling beside her father, who was seated on the couch, his face pale but alive. Why didn't you tell me he was here? Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Riley looked up, her eyes shining with tears. I wanted to protect you, Lena. You have enough to worry about. Elena crossed the room in a few long strides, kneeling beside the man she had fallen in love with. Her fingers traced the lines on his face, memorizing every feature, every scar. Riley, how long? Elena asked softly, knowing the answer wouldn't change what she felt. Riley hesitated, then said quietly, 3 months. Elena nodded, understanding dawning on her face. No wonder Riley had been distant. Her usual spark dimmed. No wonder she'd thrown herself into her work, seeking solace in the controlled chaos of the ER in the weeks that followed. Elena became a regular fixture at Riley's house, bringing food and helping to care for Riley's father. As the days passed, A new kind of routine settled over the small apartment. In the mornings, Elena would arrive with coffee and fresh fruit, the scent of citrus mingling with the sterile smell of antiseptic from the hospital. Riley, her face still etched with worry, would greet her with a tired smile. Together they would watch the sunrise, the soft light painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. During these quiet moments, Riley would talk not of crime and danger, but of hopes and dreams, sharing aspirations she had long buried under the weight of her responsibilities. Elena listened, offering words of encouragement, and sometimes, when the silence stretched too long, stories of her own. As dusk began to fall, casting long shadows across the room, Elena would leave, promising to return tomorrow. The routine brought a semblance of normalcy to their lives, a brief respite from the ever-present fear that hung over them like a shroud. But life, as it often does, had a way of intruding on even the most carefully constructed routines. One evening, as Elena made her way to Riley's apartment, she noticed a patrol car outside the building. Her heart skipped a beat. Was everything all right? Had something happened? Pushing open the door to Riley's apartment, Elena found a scene of chaos. Furniture was overturned, paper strewn across the floor, and a single overturned chair lay beside the window, its legs snapped clean off. And then she saw him, Riley, slumped over her father's lifeless body, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In that moment, Elena knew she had to be strong, not just for herself, but for Riley, who was crumbling to pieces before her eyes. Kneeling beside her, Elena wrapped her arms around Riley, letting her cry, letting her pour out the grief that threatened to consume her. "I'm so sorry, Lena," Riley whispered, her voice hoarse with anguish. Elena shook her head, her own tears blurring her vision. "It's not your fault, Riley. Don't blame yourself." The days that followed were a blur. The funeral, the condolences, the whispered rumors. Throughout it all, Elena was by Riley's side, a silent, steady presence in the face of overwhelming grief. As they navigated the labyrinth of mourning, Elena realized that their love, forged in the fires of their passions, had become their anchor.